After successfully killing John Connor, the human resistance still ends up winning the war. It seems that Skynet has been tracking the wrong John this entire time. In this new future, Skynet sends multiple Terminators back in time to deal with the real human threat, John Wick. "See ya, Mom," John yelled through the already closing front door, running down the steps and out towards the waiting school bus. "Bye, John," called his mother, catching the door just before it slammed shut. "You stay out of trouble today, you hear?" Climbing onto the bus, John nervously walked to his seat, keeping a careful distance away from the jocks, the gang wannabes, and the nerds as he squeezed through. By the time he had got to his place, he was sweating. Fidgeting, he slung off his bag and placed it on the empty seat next to him. No one really wanted to sit next to him either, as if his autism would spread through the air. Taking deep breaths to calm himself, he went through his usual routine, trying to calm his mind that relentlessly began to review every small detail he'd picked up. The driver had been drinking again, the smell of whiskey on his breath, eyes bloodshot. His right leg hung looser and heavier than usual over the side of the seat, a bulge in his side pocket, matching the size of a small firearm of some description. His reaction times would be impaired. It wouldn't really help much that the engine was revving slightly out of tune today either. The gang members were noticeably quiet, heads down on their phones, probably orchestrating another deal during school hours. Each wore something with green, a clear sign for anyone as to which group they belonged. Just the smell from them was enough to make anyone high. The jocks were, well, the jocks. Jovial and loud, too self-absorbed in their own world to care for anyone else. John really didn't want to think too much about them, but as he tried not to, an all-too-familiar voice rang out in his ears, its attention firmly upon him. "Hey, John Dick," he laughed, slapping his friends on the back as they all turned to face John's direction. It was Brad Towers, quarterback star of the high school football team, and John's worst nightmare. From day one, he'd relentlessly bullied John, preying on the fact he was autistic. "What is it? Too much going on? Am I too loud for you, retard?" he shouted directly into John's ear, taking up the seat beside him. As the bus began to move, John looked out of the window, hoping that Brad would lose interest and move away and leave him to count the number of mailboxes before they arrived at school. He didn't move. Leaning in closer, he whispered, "Listen, I've heard that the drugs guys like you can improve performance, right? I could use some of that, John, you know, for the good of the team. We're pals, right?" he said, nudging John heavily in the arm. Brad was probably already on a whole host of performance-enhancing substances, judging by his flushed face and elevated pulse. John noticing his jugular pumping and swollen at all times. John ignored him. The bus entered the freeway. "Hey, I'm taking to you, fuckwit!" he screamed, and this time he didn't nudge John, but punched him heavily in the arm. John had felt the air move and change around him, and sensed the shift in Brad's intentions and the minute twitches of the tells in his face, but didn't try to avoid the blow. It hurt. John recoiled against the window, holding his arm. He didn't cry, though. John had stopped crying a long time ago. He knew another blow would come, but just before it did, the whole bus lurched. "What the fuck is this crazy guy doing?" the bus driver called out, suddenly ramrod straight in his seat. John watched as a truck directly behind the bus rammed straight into its back, causing the back window to smash and Brad to fly down the aisle. John's head whipped forward and smashed against the seat in front, warm blood trickling down his face. While everyone screamed and the bus driver raged, his wild movements attempting to keep control of the bus's steering wheel, John lifted his head up. He was dazed slightly, he knew, but while everyone around him was suddenly panicking, flailing around and gripping onto things for dear life, John found himself calm, focused. More focused than he had ever been, with a clarity he'd never had before. He turned to look behind him just in time to see a figure leap from the truck behind and onto the roof of the bus. The truck veered and smashed into the traffic behind it before flipping over, crushing several vehicles. More screams of fear. The bus driver slammed on the brakes, but not so suddenly that John didn't notice and move himself to prepare for it. Other students weren't so lucky, slamming around and into each other painfully, the shards of glass from the back cutting and making the bus slick with blood. Whatever had been on the roof slid off the front and landed heavily into the road ahead. Just as the bus driver recovered from his daze, his hands still gripped firmly on the wheel in fear. A blast rang out, the windscreen of the bus exploding with a rain of blood to follow it. The lifeless body of the driver slumped down and off his seat. Everyone went into full panic mode, wanting to escape off the front of the bus, but daring not to go past the bloody corpse that lay blocking the exit. "Get the gun." John dived forward, keeping low. Feeling at the driver's side, he found what he knew had been there: a small pistol. He pulled it out slowly and then darted back towards the back of the bus. "Get out the back, get distance, stay low." Brad, in a daze, tried to get up and in his way, but seeing the black metal of the gun, quickly jumped back, eyes wide. John got to the back window and, caring not for the cutting pain as he placed his hands on the broken glass, jumped out and down to the road. Just as he did, he heard the heavy sound of the bus wobble as someone entered through the front entrance. "Have you seen this boy?" he heard a man speak, his voice deep and monotone. The retard? He went out the back." A blast of a shotgun, more screams. "Thank you." One man, shotgun, 2 rounds fired. "Go now." John darted for the nearest car, his gun raised. The lady in front did not need persuading to quickly leave the driver's seat. He hopped in and, without so much as a moment's hesitation, put the car into gear and sped off back in the opposite direction, aiming for the turn-off just down the road. For someone who had only barely begun learning to drive, his actions executed flawlessly with the skills of a seasoned driver. John's hands gripped the wheel. What the hell was this feeling? This power? His mind was calculating everything, performing any action with utter flawlessness. Such focus. Shaking his head, he looked in his rearview mirror just in time to see someone leap from the back of the truck and begin running after him. Running. Fast. John did not panic. He didn't even sweat. With a laser-sharp focus and pure intent, his mind began laying out what needed to be done. Not a single doubt or hint of hesitation marring the thoughts, as if it had finally found the stimulus it needed to function. He knew he would do it. Whoever it was, whatever it was, he would kill them. He would kill them all,